Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the work session for the Board of Mayor and Alderman for May the 25th, 2021. And we're going to start out by calling roll. Alderman Barnhill, are you here?
Here.
Alderman Martin?
Here.
Alderman Schroer? Alderman Speedy?
Here.
Alderman McLendon?
I'm here.
And Alderman Blanton?
Yes, sir.
Alderman Peterson?
Here.
And Vice Mayor Berger. Okay. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to make comments on items that are not on the agenda. I have no speaker cards, and that is the usual way we do things, is speaker cards, and you let me know that you're wanting to speak. I have none. We'll keep moving on. We'll go to items 1 through 5. These are 5 recurring events on an annual basis. Franklin on the 4th, Bluegrass along the Harpeth, Great American Barbecue, sponsored by the Franklin Noon Rotary, and Franklin Classic, sponsored by Mercy, Community Health Care, and Wine Down Main Street. Any questions about any of those? We have Monique here. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 6, which is thank you, Monique. Great comments. Brevity is good. Next is Resolution 2021-97, a resolution authorizing the pre-ordering of equipment prior to the commencement of the new fiscal year.
Mr.
You gonna do that?
I'll touch on this. Michael's here as well. This is something we did, well, 2 years ago when we did the budget. We have certain equipment that has a rather long lead time to order. And so equipment that has been identified in the proposed budget, we'd like to have your authorization to start that process of ordering. They won't come in, they won't need to be paid for till we're well into the new fiscal year, but getting started on it is helpful in us getting equipment in a timely manner. That's especially true with what's going on right now in the world. So it's typically important, but it's especially important right now because of the difficulty in getting certain equipment in a timely manner. So this would just give us authorization to start that process. It is primarily equipment in sanitation, police cruisers. I think we've got a leaf vac equipment, that type of thing that we're looking at. Typically heavy equipment or police cruisers, which have some special equipment and modifications that take place with them.
Any questions? We'll keep moving along. Item 7 is consideration ordinance 2021-07, an ordinance to amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance of the City of Franklin to redefine substantial damage and substantial improvement related to the cumulative time frame and market value.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Mayor.
Shannon.
Good evening, everyone. I'll try to keep this short because we've discussed this numerous times at this point. But as you know, we've had several public meetings to go over the floodplain regulations. On the 22nd of April, the First Amendment was presented to the Planning Commission. The Commission was in favor of the independent appraisal being allowed for determining market value, but they were not in favor of changing the cumulative time frame from 10 years down to 5. There was very lengthy discussion over the requirements and what the whole purpose of substantial damage and improvement requirements are for. The motion to amend, the main motion to redefine substantial improvement was presented by Commissioner Harrison and seconded by Commissioner McLemore, and the commission passed the motion unanimously. I apologize. I had to rush down the hall. I'm out of breath. The original ordinance stated that the time frame for calculation would be 10 years and reduced down to 5 years. With the amendment proposed by the Planning Commission, the time frame would remain at 10 years. This means that if the cumulative value of the repairs and/or improvements over the 10-year period exceeds the 50% of the value of the structure alone, then the structure is required to be brought into full compliance with all the standards of construction for the floodplain. Excuse me. So, welcome your questions and feedback.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to clarify, staff is still
Recommending,
recommending
yeah.
the change down from 10 to 5. Planning Commission made a different recommendation on that aspect, but staff is still recommending the change.
Correct.
Thanks, because she wasn't jiving with what I was reading, so I was confused.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was like, And then we're gonna talk about the freeboard later, is what I understand?
Yes.
Correct.
How do those calculations, how are they affected by the, every 5 year, the property reassessment appraisals? How is that factored in?
With the county's reassessment, yeah, the county reassesses, and if that value goes up and if they did an improvement 2 years earlier, and then the assessment goes up, then they have that latitude with the difference.
Yeah, that dynamic doesn't really change.
Yeah, that doesn't
from what you
change.
have now.
Correct.
It does give people the opportunity to get the appraisal from other sources to update that outside of the
The county.
county appraisal.
Yeah, currently we
process.
do the county plus 15%.
Right, I guess I'm saying some homes had 0 improvements, but their appraisals went up, 32%, I guess. Right?
Well, this only has to do with if you spend more than 50%, then you have to do everything that is required to get it out of the floodplain, basically.
Right, so if they do no
At the
improvements.
time of the improvements, I guess. Okay.
Any other comments or questions for Shannon?
But there, at the
Go ahead.
planning commission, I could say that there was a person who was very concerned about saying that people would just go ahead and make a lot of improvements to their house just for themselves. But then whenever it flooded, then everybody was back in, was backed on that. And so he was concerned about people, just doing a lot of things to their house, and then it wound up being more damage there. And I can understand that, but I'm fine with what the staff recommends, going down to the 5 years.
Yes, Commissioner Lindsay was concerned that, the whole purpose of the cumulative time frame and substantial improvement is to get non-compliant structures, which City of Franklin does have, the majority of the structures that are in the floodplain are non-compliant, to get them into compliance so that when a flood event does occur, they're not having reoccurring damage. They're not filing claims repeatedly with flood insurance. And, the discussion was that if we allow the continuation, drop it to 5 years and allow property owners to keep investing in non-compliant structures, that we're not necessarily helping them, was where that discussion went and how that motion came around.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Would we be voting on that sometime we don't vote on that.
That is not on the voting session tonight. It will come back for the first voting session on the 8th.
Next month. Okay. You may have dropped your pen there, Shannon.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Okay, we'll keep moving along. Item 8 is contract 2021-0108 between the City of Franklin and the African American Heritage Society for the receipt of Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Funds.
Good afternoon. This is just a continuation of spending some of the extra CARES Act funds we have received, and the African American Heritage Society, in addition to Juneteenth, will bring in a health fair, which will feature mental health advocates, a dentist, Williamson County Health Department, and I believe Mercy Clinic. they've requested $3,000 to offset some of those costs.
Everybody good? Keep moving along. Thank you. Next is item 9 and 10. I guess we can look at those together even though they're different. Both are denying sewer availability. The first one is for Gentry Farms on Highway 96 West, and the second one is deny sewer availability for Harding Ventures, which is on Del Rio Pike.
Good evening, Alderman. These two requests, this one and the one following, are for, in conjunction with the work that you asked staff to proceed with the property owners out in the West Basin. And we've had numerous conversations with the property owners, and these two property owners, the Gentry family and the Harding Ventures property, have asked that they stay in the county. And by denying this availability, it will allow staff then to update the basin plan for this area, as well as Connect Franklin, which is the transportation plan. We are talking with the Short family as we speak for their development plan that will be coming in, but it's important that we get by these two requests so they know and we know they're going to not take advantage of city public infrastructure, the sewer, and then we can update the major thoroughfare plan as well as the basin plan.
Go ahead, Alderman
I
Martin.
have a question. Why is it why are we not voting on this tonight?
Because we don't normally put items on both the work session and voting meeting unless it's imperative. But if you have any questions, that's fine, we can answer them, and then you'll be voting on it at the June 8th voting meeting.
Okay.
Yes, we try to avoid to put items on both the work session that require discussion and the voting meeting, unless it's imperative. But based on your comments, we'll keep going with the amendments to the basin plan and Connect Franklin.
Other questions? I've got a question, but you go ahead, Alderman
I was just
Peterson.
going to say, they're wanting to stay in the county means then that they will be at the most very large lots. You know, the county's saying 5 acres.
At the present time, under their regulations, that would be true. The Gentry family has indicated they have no plans on changing what they do at the present time with their property. And also, the Harding Ventures are continuing to pursue an equestrian
Right.
type of neighborhood that would be large lots and company horses and such.
And originally, whenever we were looking at this entire basin, we were talking about, about 2 units to the acre for the
Yes.
whole thing? So this would be like 1 unit for 5 acres. So
Or more.
much fewer number of residences.
I would say, and you'll see this in the future, but just as a point of information, the other property owners seem to align with the direction of a unit per couple acres or so. The Short family has a more creative farmstead type of proposal that I think you'll find interesting, but a little bit more dense too. But we'll have that discussion at a later date.
Alderman Blanton?
It's also my understanding that, and I don't know if this is appropriate, that we don't have to access the Gentry farm to accommodate sewer for the rest of the West Basin, correct?
That is correct.
Because
And
they've
that's
had
why-
a
yes.
lot of other infrastructure run through their farm, and it's been understood by me, and Scott's here, he can speak to it, that we need to stop running through the farm, and this will also kind of seal that deal. Is that my understanding?
Yes, planning is important, and that's why these two actions get us to working on the basin plan and the road
With them
plan.
removed. Okay, understood.
Yes. Connectivity with the county is still an overriding issue, but that's a different conversation at a different.
Thank you.
You know, Mayor,
Go ahead, Alderman Martin.
I was just hoping that since we're all on the same page on these two properties, that we could have voted on it tonight, since there's no controversy about it. You know, the property owners wanted it in March, and we said, no, we couldn't do it in March. You did say June, but, you know, we were hoping it would get done before then.
Alderman Martin, I'll take responsibility for that, because that's normally how we flow items. You get a chance to see them at work session, you discuss, and then you vote 2 weeks later. And so we didn't differentiate this from other items, and given the magnitude of it, thought it would be appropriate to have that time frame for you to discuss and then vote at a separate meeting, as opposed to trying to do it all in one night. And no one made us aware that there was any absolute time urgency, and so we treated it like a normal item.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, and thank you, Eric and Alderman Martin. You know, the other plan updates, we're working on them as expeditiously as possible, and this was really an unusual way to plan a very important, precious part of our community, but it's getting done. Maybe not done by June, but we're moving very well towards that, and I appreciate the residents that have worked with us. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think I have a question, if I might, Mr. Earth, in reference to Harding Ventures, which is 571 acres that we understand is going to kind of maintain that pastoral character of that area. But even though that's not going to have much density, we'll be planning roads that do not involve that 571 acres. Will we have any leverage at all as far as what impact they may make on other roads and infrastructure as we develop our transportation plan for that area?
Well, they are, from what we have heard, they're still planning a gated community. And with the 50 or so homes, the impact won't be that great. But we, with the Living Field Moore property, as we bring the Connect Franklin back to you, we do want to leave open until we are for certain what the properties that will develop in the city has, that we leave the roadway network available until we have more information. The only really detailed information we have at this point will be for the short property.
Okey-doke.
I hope that answered your question.
Item 11, grant availability for 1115 Holly Hill Drive. Grant sewer availability for Holly Hill Drive. Go ahead, Michelle.
So this is 1115 Holly Hill Drive, the first road going south on Lewisburg, right there after you pass Nature's Landing on the left. They're just requesting for one SFUE, so typical household usage. It's located outside the city limits, which is why it's being brought to you for consideration. They're requesting, however, the request is for for installation of a low-pressure grinder pump system. What we typically do for availabilities is that's the last option when we evaluate sewer service. We typically try to promote gravity sewer. It's lower operations and maintenance cost in the city. It's easier for us to maintain. This availability, however, is requesting that to start off with, and so the water department is requesting denial because it's not the typical way that we like to develop the system. As a sidebar, the availability was brought, or this and a couple other availabilities were also brought to the board last CIC in April, and we asked for guidance on developing a kind of like a sewer study plan for the Red Wing Farms area. So if you remember in the past, we've granted several denials because it's just not been feasible with aging septic systems for folks to extend the gravity sewer. So we, on Thursday CIC, we have a contract with a consultant to do an evaluation for sanitary survey, gravity sewer in the Red Wing and kind of those southern neighborhoods all the way to Berry Farms. So we're recommending denial for this availability until we get that study done in which we can further evaluate the proposed request.
But isn't it my understanding, sorry, Mayor, Matt,
Oh, you may,
I mean, to
please.
assume that there's already one resident on Holly Hill that does have access and has, and believe me, I try to figure out the water world and I'm still working on it, but, that has a, what am I thinking about?
Like
Mr.
a-
Franks has access to.
A low-pressure system as well, yeah.
Right.
So that's an individual service. This would be another, so
Is
what
this
what
a-
is being requested is an individual service just for 1115 Holly Hill Drive.
And where is this in reference to the one that already exists? Because the map's really close, so I'm trying to figure out where we are.
Yeah, so this is a little bit more west toward Lewisburg Pike, whereas his address, I think, is at the end of that cul-de-sac or at the end of that drive right there, the larger property. It is kind of harder to see. The bubble kind of takes up
So
a lot of that.
this is not the same that we spoke about at CIC. This is a different one?
No, so this was included in that group of properties that was initially requested. With working with Vernon, we've narrowed down all of those properties to just this one, 1115 Holly Hill Drive. After kind of discussions, the water department recommends denial. However, if the board chooses to approve this availability, we recommend some different contingencies that we typically have provided with other properties to kind of allow for some consistency. So after we perform this study and we develop a sanitary survey, a gravity system for this entire area, that they still be required to participate in whatever.
And I think they were amenable to all of those conditions. I think my confusion is this has changed since we saw it at the last CIC. So trying to figure out what we're talking about here based on what we did talk about is confusing me because, and I know that the staff still was not recommending it. Thank you, Vernon, because I'm confused.
I think the change is it's just it's one property, not three or whatever it was then.
Yeah, so this
That's
is
That's the only real change.
So when the request came in, it wasn't actually, it was just to connect these properties. It wasn't an availability request. So we've modified that and we've actually made it an availability request. Instead of doing all of those 6 properties, we've pared it down to the one essential property that Mr. Franks is asking for availability for.
Can you look at the other map?
Yeah, let me,
That second map,
He
not
didn't
this.
apply for all those properties?
No, I mean
No, he
the
didn't.
second.
yeah.
He did.
So what Mr. Franks had agreed to is that when we talked after the CIP meeting is that since we're going to do the study, that he said he would agree to participate in whatever solution that our consultant finds. And in talking to him, we talked about that we don't know what the impact will be, whether the low-pressure system could be a solution, or if he would need to participate in a larger, I hate to use the word, but neighborhood-wide assessment district to get the gravity sewer installed, which has different cost implications to all the property owners, including Mr. Franks. He said at the present time that all he wants is a service to his daughter's home, that they're going to demolish and build a new home there, and he can't, none of the property owners in the neighborhood can expand their habitable space because they're all on septic systems. So he's fine with the time to just this one property until we complete the study. And
Thank
then
you.
if it's a gravity solution, he'll participate and take this one offline if he's that far. Or maybe the low-pressure system to all those properties will be a solution. We don't know that yet. But we do want to pursue the gravity solution because it's a more sustainable public sewer system.
That's very helpful.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I think Margaret has a
No, that's all right.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
But
Alderman Martin.
I just want to say, and if that happens, that all of that area wants to come in, then we could look at annexation.
Yes.
We
That's
must
a big
look at
It's a
annexation.
bigger discussion that would involve our legal department.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That
It was
one,
like
that one.
Brandy, because that's not what we talked about at the meeting. It was just totally different. And I did talk with him, and he does want all those properties available now. He really didn't want to wait for the study because we don't have that 6 months to a year. And there are some additions to be put on some of those other homes that he needs as well. But that's all. I went out there actually and looked at it, because I called him up and I said, can I come out and see what you're talking about? Because I do better when I see it. So I was standing here, and the sewer is here. And he wants it here. It was like I could reach it and touch it. It was so close in the manhole. And so then I looked, and there's all these properties, and they're all clustered in this one area, whereas the subdivision, and good luck with having the entire subdivision want to be annexed in, because I don't think that's going to happen. And at some point, if they want sewer, we've many times, when it's contiguous to the city, we've provided sewer many times.
But not to a neighborhood.
Yeah,
Well-
that hasn't been annexed, you're right. So I'm a little confused here, because I know, I asked him to point out where the homes were and what he wanted to do. So he showed that to me. Because I literally needed to see that after we had that discussion. And so I think maybe, were there some, am I mistaken, but were there some that required grinder pumps?
They all would with a
Would all of them?
low-pressure
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, so it's like at Highgate, we provided, allowed some grinder pumps there as well. But they would take them offline and come in when sewer came, but that was a whole different story, because there's a couple there that couldn't deal with the gravity. But I just look at that and go, it's there, it's right here. And then those homes are on that north side of the road, whatever road that is, I can't remember, Holly Hill is it? But anyway, then if you go down, that whole subdivision's like way down there. I mean, it's all spread out. I mean, they all have acreage and everything else. And I just thought it was, I don't know, it seemed impractical to me to look at. I'm not against the study, don't get me wrong. But I just thought it looked impractical to lump all of those together when you had that new subdivision. And would they not be amenable to having all of those homes annexed?
Well, for
Because-
whatever reason, Vice Mayor, they've only requested one, so I don't know that it's really within our purview to speculate about all those other properties now.
Well,
And they own
if I may,
Same-
because
same owner.
when Mr. Franks requested, he didn't do it properly. He sent a letter to the city administrator. We had him submit
Yeah.
requests for all those properties, but in the conversations that ensued, the design of a sewer system to serve any area of the community is one that, a decision you'll make, but if it's a gravity sewer that's going to be in a newly annexed area where you have failing septic systems, and we've dealt with Monticello, Highgate, some other ones, that to proportion out the cost of that to each property is part of the discussion, because if you pull out some parcels in already a platted subdivision, which makes it even harder to annex property, then you're imposing a larger cost on those other property owners, and still, we don't know what the true design should be. Yes, in this case, it's more efficient for a low-pressure system just based on what Mr. Franks showed you and Matt Bryant, the designer, looked at, but it doesn't mean that's the best solution for the overall area. And that's why we're trying to compromise by giving Mr. Frank's daughter what he needs to do the work, and then allow us time to look at, have the study completed and come back to you with an ultimate solution.
Yeah, and one last, okay, I understand that, it's logical. One last question, how much money are we spending on the study, and are we going out to bid for the study?
So we'll present this on Thursday CIC, but it's I think it's less than 50,000, which is what we had indicated in the last board meeting, or in the last April CIC. And we have, so the water department has engineering on-call contracts where we've already pre-approved some consultants based off of tiered levels, based off of skill sets. And so this is going to one of those consultants.
Okay, I was curious, I couldn't remember.
Yeah,
what
no,
we
no,
said-
that's
what we
perfectly-
said in that meeting. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okey-doke. Item 12, procurement award to Civil Environmental Consultants, Inc. of Franklin, Tennessee, in the total estimated annual amount of $6,237.08 for the annual stream bioassessment sampling, testing, and identification water and wastewater contract services for the Water Management Department. Any questions about that one? Item 13, presentation of the new City Hall master planning.
Good evening. Tonight's the BOMA input session for the master planning for the City Hall facility on the public square. We have this input session tonight for BOMA, and then we have another session. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We have another session on Thursday at the Joint Conceptual Workshop at 5 o'clock to also discuss the City Hall master planning. So tonight we're going to start with a short video that will play shortly that our communications team put together that will introduce the topic, and then I'll turn it over to Matt Taylor with OHM Studio 8 design team to lead the discussion and present the information. Thank you. Please roll it.
When it rains in Franklin, it leaks in City Hall.
If you look up, you're going to see water spots on the ceiling.
Building is almost 50 years old, and it has really outlived its lifespan. It's got a leaking roof, and it's almost constant when it rains.
Air conditioning has been one of our biggest problems. Probably in the last 5 to 6 years, we've probably have spent nearly, I'd say, $50,000 to $100,000 just on new air conditioners, because we still have air conditioners that go back to the day the building was built.
The roof and HVAC systems are just part of the problem.
Water lines and sewer lines, we have problems with once a month, at least on sewer lines, backing up and getting clogged.
It's an old building that it costs more to keep it up than it would be to tear it down and build a new building.
We've been operating in this building, which was built originally as a shopping mall, since 1981, and it's been 40 years now, and we've tried to make it the best that we can, but we're still working in an environment that really was set up as an old shopping mall with a large central hall inside, and we're working in old department store spaces that have been broken up over time, and it's really inefficient.
Last fall, the city began the design process to plan for a new City Hall. Input is needed from the community.
We want to create a place that our citizens can be proud of, a building that we can be proud of, that's a civic building where we engage the community. A lot of important decisions are made at City Hall every month that affect the future of this city, and we want citizens to be a part of that, and we want an environment that encourages them to be here.
A new building would also be better for city employees.
One of our most important assets are our employees, and our employees deserve a place where they can work and be very productive. I'm eager for them to have a new space to work in, to continue to be productive for our city and our citizens. So our employees deserve a better facility.
You can be a part of the design process. Here's how.
Good evening. Thank you all for the opportunity to come share their
Speak a little
current-
more into the mic if you would there.
Sure.
Matt,
Is that a little
thank
better?
you. That's better.
Usually, people don't have a problem hearing me, so.
You've got all that plexiglass.
I
around
know,
you.
I know.
So much safety.
Well, thank you all for taking the time tonight for this public engagement session. This one's special to have you all here and present. We want to share with you some of the ideas that we've been talking with other civic and public groups about over the last month or so during our public engagement process. Believe you have a copy of our presentation, and that'll be shown on the screen as we go. So I'd like to walk through at the beginning on behalf of our team. Annabeth Kimbrough is my partner, and she's here to help me take notes and hear the discussion that we have tonight. I'm going to stop at intervals to I'll ask for questions and comments from you all as we go through this. And then we do, as Kelly mentioned, we have Thursday night again to continue the discussion as part of the joint conceptual workshop. So we, as you all have seen on the cover sheet, we've got a pretty good team assembled to analyze a lot of different aspects of what the future of City Hall will look like, from technology to all of the architectural and engineering design disciplines and interior design. So we're really trying to take a broad approach in this first phase of soliciting input and feedback across the board to help shape what the parameters of a new City Hall will look like with the input of the citizens, the staff, and different local organizations. If we can go to the next page. Here's a brief outline of what we'll talk about tonight. The master plan design process. I'm not going to dwell on the need for a new City Hall because I think our video that we just saw made that argument pretty well, and you all have been here enough to be familiar with a lot of those reasons. The role of City Hall in the community, establishing some of the master plan goals, functionality, customer interface, supporting uses, and architectural style. Next page. This, the design process is going to be a long one. There's going to be a lot of time for a lot of continued input, not just this month and this summer. As you can see, we're in the red first engagement, or first public engagement process, about halfway down the page, just a few months in from when we started work at the beginning of the year. That process will continue to where we come back before you with, we'll have a second public engagement process this fall as we develop some very preliminary master plan options to solicit another round of public feedback for those. We'll drill that down and bring that back to you for your review and approval and comments before moving on to schematic design next year. As you can see at the top right corner, we've got a squiggle line in the dates there because this project's probably going to last another 5 or 6 years as we anticipate, depending on how the design and feedback process goes. So we're very early in this process. On the next page. Again, I don't need to dwell on this too much. You all know where we are and know the context of this particular site with City Hall and the parking garage, which will remain on 2nd Avenue. The Pull-Tight Theater and Historic Greenhouse will also remain, and we'll be sensitive to how we buffer with those, and then looking at the existing City Hall site for redevelopment. Next page. I'm going to get my glasses. So these are some of the questions that we will want to get your feedback from tonight and over the next several months. Why does Franklin need a new City Hall? What role should that City Hall play in the community? What's most important to you when considering the development of a new City Hall in downtown Franklin? What is most important to you in creating a functional workspace? In your opinion, what would be the most beneficial? What would be most beneficial in improving customer interface? What type of supporting uses do you envision on this block in addition to a City Hall? And what type of architecture would you like to see? Next page. And as we just talked about in the video, I think these reasons are all basically covered and familiar with everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next. So the role of City Hall in the community, we've had a lot of discussions about this and looked at other case studies as well. What we want to know is this is Franklin City Hall. So what role should the City Hall play in our community? We want to provide places for the community to gather beyond City Hall functions. We want to embrace neighborhood partnerships. There's been some discussion about a museum component. We have public art in the hallways now. There may be other historic exhibits that start to tell some of the story of the city of Franklin. There's been a suggestion for visitor information centers as a place for visitors to come and get their bearings when they come visit downtown, where to go and what's happening and what Franklin's all about. We've talked about an educational component for the community and providing something for all ages. So this is one of our pause points that I'd like to stop and open that up for any feedback on these or other additional suggestions that you all may have about the role of City Hall in the local community here.
Go Go ahead, Alderman Barnhill.
Expand on the museum components and public art and historic display and how does that function within the city hall? How does it function with this building right here, right now?
Well, right here now, I know in the hallways, there have been displays
There's
set
a
up.
few pictures there, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry?
There's a few pictures there, yeah.
Sure, and we've seen in other city halls is sometimes they take the opportunity to tell the history of their city and their community, who founded it, what major milestone events may have happened in their history. That may be artwork exhibits on the wall, it may be displays in the lobby, it may be part of what broadcasts on the TV. We may have public art around the building, on the grounds outside. There may be public art inside the building that is either permanent or a rotating exhibit. All of these kind of suggestions and ideas are not things that we are necessarily proposing, as they are ideas we've uncovered that other places have done or have been suggested as part of this project. And so there may be some that you all disagree with and don't feel are appropriate, and we would like to hear that feedback as much as we would like to hear what you would like to see.
We also do, on the Fireman's Hall, we do painting and art shows there too.
Okay.
Now,
And one other question. I think there was something reference to something other than City Hall, and I'm assuming, I don't know whether to assume or not. Is that some kind of retail or?
Well, we'll come to that. That was in the outline of things we're going to talk about.
Okay.
So I'm sort of stopping at the first bullet point now, but we will come to other uses and what's appropriate or not appropriate to happen. We're very much in an objective listening role right now, that we are helping to share things that have happened in other places or that have been suggested in the early research of this project. That doesn't mean we want to include all of that in Franklin. We would like your feedback and the public's feedback on what is appropriate and what does Franklin's City Hall want to include and incorporate.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Alderman Martin.
Well, Matt, I think you've got a real challenge here because, first of all, you've got to have room for people to do whatever it is they need to do. But I see nothing in these pictures right here that's warm and inviting.
Okay?
Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to see something like that. I don't know how you achieve that,
Sure.
but you're the professional, so.
Right. And these are examples, for example, the one on the top left next to the text there is Mount Pleasant, South Carolina City Hall. That's an example of some of their historic exhibits that they've incorporated into their lobby. The Independence Visitor Center, it just is an example of how a visitor center could play a role in the lobby or in the activity of City Hall.
Looks like an airport.
These are not necessarily design ideas from a style standpoint. These are functional ideas, and we have a whole road to get to that we haven't even started in terms of what Franklin City Hall will look like. So what we really want to talk about are activity concepts, activities that may happen in City Hall, whether or not you feel it's appropriate to have the history of the city communicated to the public. What that looks like, we'll get to in the next several years. But we don't even start designing until you approve us to after this whole first phase. So
You know what
don't
I'm
get hung
talking
up on the style of what you see here. Buda, Texas has its own expression and its own City Hall, which is the bottom left corner. And Boston City Hall is a much more brutalist design, but they have gone through a major renovation to try and promote activities to make it more welcoming in their plaza out front, as well as their lobby space inside, while balancing security concerns and others. So that's more about the kinds of things that can happen with an open stair and potentially a coffee shop or a coffee kiosk, a visitor center, place for people to gather so that we size that lobby appropriately and the lobby becomes functional, not just circulation. So those are the kinds of things, when you see these images here, that we want you to look at, not so much the style. If you hate the style, tell us too, because we want to know that. But we're not to the design stage yet. Right now, we're still trying to figure out what the building is and how it needs to function. So if it wants to have some of these functions and play this role in City Hall, then we want to build that into the program. If we don't, then we're going to eliminate it and not make that a design consideration.
Alderman Blanton?
If Clyde wants to go ahead, that's fine.
Yeah. I guess my question would be this, is straight to the point as I can. You can get all of that into the building
That's
here
right.
for 24 million.
We haven't designed a building, so I don't have a budget for, we have your
I've got a
budget for the
budget
building?
24 million.
So, but I don't have anything for a contractor to put a price tag to for you yet. So that, part of that will be a determination of how much do we want in the building? And if we want
That's
more,
exactly.
it may cost more. If we want less, we'll save some money. So it's important right now to flesh out, what do we want? What's the wish list? What's the vision? If we're going to build a building that's going to last another 50 or 100 years, and it's actually going to be designed as a city hall for a unique place that we all call home, what should that look like? How should it work?
Gargoyles.
One book for
Blanton,
gargoyles.
Go ahead.
So, I have had the privilege of being able to go visit other city halls through the Vision City Visit, which is now actually being very helpful. And I think I've seen elements in all of those visits, so I'm like, oh, no, yes, what have you. I think, and just kind of going through these pictures, with the idea of telling Franklin's history at City Hall, I think it could be very relevant because we do have so much history that people come to see, but it's about a battle, not about Franklin. And I can see it being a destination for school-age children to learn about Franklin in a different way that's not attached to one of our other incredibly well-done historic homes or sites. And I think it's a natural way to bring children into the building for a reason, so they feel comfortable to return. Another thing that I've talked about or have heard spoken about in other arenas of Complete the Square is the idea of having a plaza-type entrance, which I think is great, and also an opportunity for some outside areas for people to gather. So I like that. I also think that the information aspect is pretty vital because I know one of the big things people want are public restrooms. I think we've all heard that. And I think...
Those cost extra.
I know, but I think that's important. And I know that we do have the visitor center and it serves its purpose, but there might be a way to partner with them since we do support them to bring that to City Hall. But it's another element of welcoming people into the city to gather information and not duplicate services. We don't ever want to compete with somebody who's doing something similar. Lastly, for now, I look at this picture that has the opportunity for retail for beverages. I don't necessarily think that that's appropriate. I think that's competing with some of our other people downtown, and we want people to come, and I do. I want people to spend money and the people who make their business doing that. So those are my few comments right out of the gate on this slide.
Great.
Alderman Peterson, you want to make a comment?
Just to begin, you know, I'm interested in having a good amount of office space for the people that are going to be working here. You know, I mean, more than, that bottom right thing there is just like, you know, look at how much space this takes up. That's, you know, kind of ridiculous. I appreciate the things that have already been said. But as I say, I'm more interested in what we're going to do to make, you know, what we have now much better and easier for not only for the people who work here, but for the people who come here to, you know, I don't want to say pay their taxes, but you know what I mean, that are needing to come here for a connection with the people who are employed here.
And we've conducted a whole series of interviews with every department and many of the staff and gone to tour a few places virtually as well as a handful in person, to see examples of different kinds of office space and how that may or may not be relatable and appropriate for City Hall. And so obviously the staff is the DNA of the building. It's got to work, it's got to serve the citizens. That's going to be concern number one. And then we have a building that's going to be a rather large building in the context of historic downtown, right on the square and the most valuable piece of property. And so if it's going to be there 100 years, we want to get it right. And what right is may vary to different people. So we really want to look to you all as the leaders of this city to get your input about what is right and what's appropriate as well. So
Well,
we're in very much a Switzerland listening mode of not pushing any one thing. And we may show you things that contradict each other because we want to get your feedback on, I like this, I don't like that. And so this is about options and what has been done in other places in our conversation tonight. And so we definitely want your feedback on what you do like, don't like. You're not going to hurt our feelings. This is, all of this is really important for us to give us a starting point that automatically goes in the right direction.
But also, I'm thinking about, obviously, not if you're thinking for 100 years, but think about how much Franklin has grown in the last, few decades. And to think that people that are working here, how many more employees we have, and also the space that will be needed, not just whenever this could get done, but
You're
in
exactly
the
right.
years,
Yep.
which I think is extremely important.
We agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
Well, one of them.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Have you taken into consideration the amount of use this building's got in the last year and a half? I mean, have you
Yes.
done any looks at what the COVID virus has done to the building and to how people work and how people pay their bills? Because no one comes down here to pay their taxes that I know of. They probably don't come down here to pay a water bill. They probably don't come down here to pay anything else to speak of because they go online. They either pay it with a bank draft or they pay it some other means. It would be interesting to know how many people have actually used City Hall because they've become acclimated not to using it. I don't see where that right there is. I mean, I don't see that's not in my vision, okay?
Sure.
I think what my vision is what the employees want and need in order to function, to do their jobs daily. And that's how City Hall should, I think it should be, that's how it should be looked at.
And we're documenting that, and we'll present that to you.
Okay.
That is going to be, and the aspect of COVID and whatever the next incident is something that we're obviously paying attention to in the operations and our discussions with staff and leadership, and who can work from home and who can't work from home. We're dealing with that across the design industry, with corporations who have gone completely virtual to it's over, we're vaccinated, we're coming back. And there's different opinions about that, which sometimes is just the culture of what that organization is. And we want to take that into account for Franklin. I think this past year has certainly been a learning experience. Since we don't even start design for almost another year, this next year is going to be just as important to see what happens as we come back. And how do we operate, in which we then get examples of both. And what's the right thing to do. So we're going to have a lot of time to continue to have that discussion over the next couple of years and factor that into the design.
Go ahead, Alderman Vice Mayor.
Matt?
Yes,
hey,
ma'am.
Yeah, so in the industry is finding that sometimes they're saying we need less space now, but they're also finding they need more space because how they're figuring out to keep their people at work and not do that. So some industries are saying we might build larger, or we might spread out more to have people have bigger spaces. Other times, people are saying, no, we need smaller spaces. So there's a take and give in the industry right now. If you've been reading up on that, and I'm sure you have been. So there's a ton of things here. Brandy, totally, she talked about the plaza type entrance, the outside areas. I think those are really important. Rooftop use is very important too. But I think we have to keep in mind we can't be all things to all people.
Absolutely.
We can't be all things to all organizations. So what's really important in a city hall? You take a look at, we already have art on the wall. We have wonderful art. So there's no reason we couldn't have great art on the wall and even have a a art gallery kind of thing, but, you know, not necessarily as a museum belong in a city hall, but you can still tell the story of Franklin.
Right.
Something I think that's always missing in Franklin that I never hear, maybe it's just me, I never hear anything about Benjamin Franklin, who we've named our town after. He's nowhere to be found. And so I think that's part of the history it's missing. But if we look at that information center, I think is key to any city. An information center, whether we would rent out space to the information, to the visitor center, or how we want to work that. I think a visitor information center does belong in City Hall. Then you take a look at that last slide, and I have a pro and con about that. The one on the bottom. First of all, you've got a lot of space, you've got a lot of wasted space, you've got a lot of space to heat and cool. But at the same time, when we have functions at City Hall and we have people coming in here, we have to have places for people to gather and talk. So actually a larger lobby sometimes is a smart thing because you need places for people to gather. A prominent staircase is very important because people need to be able to walk in and run upstairs to whatever floor they need to be at. Doesn't need to be a huge, gigantous staircase, but it has to be wide enough to get 3 or 4 people up. And I think we could talk about space and how you utilize the space in relationship to expenses, heating and air and all that again. I just wrote down a few more notes. I'm not opposed to a coffee shop because we have people coming in here all the time saying, do you have any coffee? Do you have water? Do you have something that they can grab and go to meetings? And sometimes that's helpful. It depends how you're using City Hall again. We could have a rental space for a kiosk for that. We don't have to provide that for free. We need to talk about that. The other thing is I think we have to remember that we're not building this for us. We're not building it for today. We're building this for 100 years. And we do need to look modern. We do need to have some modern looks in our place, but Margaret's worry about how it is warm, we know it comes through design. It comes through materials that are used. It comes through color that's used. So those kinds of things will speak to that. The only other thing I would say is that what we see as needs and wants, we need to make sure that we're expanding our horizon to how things are going to function. We're going to rely upon you and all those teams of people to show us what's happening in the fields today with the needs that we have with city halls and city halls around the country. And I think whoever said it was right. You know, I think Clyde talked about bill paying. In the future, probably will not be one time a person will come in the future to pay a bill at City Hall. They're still coming here, but it's not like it used to be. What do we have online right now? People can even submit their plans online. They used to have to come down to City Hall all the time and submit their plans. So the way we function, we already know has changed over the years. And I think Clyde's right. You know, this is all going to change too. So we have to look to the future on that. Those would be my comments.
No, thank you. I know we still have most of our pages to cover, so I don't want to rush or cut off conversation, but I do want to, in a couple cases, we've touched on things that we're going to get to. So
I'd like to make a few comments before you go
Sure,
on.
yes, sir, please do.
So I think the first thing is you have to have a building that's safe. This building is almost impossible to make secure. Got to have some public bathrooms. I think these pictures you've shown us are not, I think the proportions are all wrong. You need to be showing us pictures of something that's going to be on this square and give us that feel of what that size and proportion is going to be. I mean, we don't want a lobby that goes from the square all the way back to the back. I think, you got to address this is the place where citizens do business, and there's lots of interaction here. Obviously, there's lots of opportunity for community meetings and also places where employees can have interactions other than just in their office and in their department where they can have those collaborative spaces. I do like the idea of somewhat of a plaza feeling coming in. I'd like to understand better the footprint that this is going to occupy. If it occupies a whole block, I'm not sure that's exactly what I want to see, but certainly if there's an opportunity to have some public green space somewhere where people can gather, that would be great. I like the beverage idea. Museum, I think that's appropriate. You know, we've got a lot of history we could talk about, and remote work. Keep going.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
One quick thing, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how we designate how many seats we're gonna have to have. Because I think that's gonna be interesting, because I think there's times when it's like tonight, and then there's times where it's standing room only.
Right.
And the use of this room, will it be another revenue rental thing, or will it be more like the police department where people can use that room? What business are we in, and how accommodating do we need to be? And so I think all of those things are going to be interesting as it relates to this room.
And those are great programmatic topics that have come up for discussion, and we are still taking feedback on that, and how those rooms may operate, you know, what they look like, what presence do they have to support board meetings versus community meetings.
The ability to build in some flexibility to expand to a larger meeting and
Right.
down to a smaller, and
Matt,
still use this
yeah,
space effectively.
Or to
Absolutely.
have the whole staff together like we do. I mean, I don't know if that's feasible or realistic to do Christmas breakfast down the halls, and I don't know what that looks like, so.
But Matt, maybe I put a bug in your ear listening to both of those comments. That is, if you go to, like the Marriott, you know, if you have a group of 200, you've got a room. If you say, oh, wow, 500 are going to show, what do? They open the petition.
Right.
So maybe in a boardroom, we look at a wall that's removable, where you punch a button and those walls open up, and you also, so we have a big issue coming up, and we expect 500 people to show. Are they able to be accommodated? Well, not in this kind of room, but maybe if we open it up.
Sure.
So that could be a possibility if you could look into that.
Absolutely, and that's part of the discussion that we're working through with the program right now, so. Okay, moving on to the next slide, as we talk about establishing some of the master plan goals. Historic context is a big one, obviously, in downtown Franklin. So we have examples of some of the old buildings that used to sit on this site, from Crockett's Grocery Store and Wagner Store, the Pie Wagon that used to be located next to the courthouse and then up across on the northwest corner of the square. There used to be a public garden where the Second Avenue parking garage sits, speaking of public green space. There's anecdotal stories about a water trough that used to be located right at the corner of Third Avenue as it entered the square, because this became a real crossroads where you had livery stables like you see in the bottom right corner, and a blacksmith shop also here on the City Hall site. So this was where people came in to shop and to come to Main Street, do their business, meet their neighbors, different activities, and really sort of a crossroads at that entrance to the square there. We also thought it was really interesting that this is the only quadrant of the square that has changed so much over time. There have been several different iterations of buildings here, not just this mall building, but even historically there have been different buildings here. The history of the stables is more or less gone from downtown Franklin, but we thought it was very interesting that the downtown stables were really more of an urban version of a barn, that these are brick with brick corbelling details and a parapet and the big arches that you don't see anymore. That's sort of a lost piece of our history. And if there's some desire to try and incorporate that and bring it back, there were two other stables on East Main Street, just east of the square, on both sides of the street. You'll see some pictures of that later. On the next page, if we, in talking about site context, the relationship of the square and integration into the building context of building a new building in a very historic setting. City Hall has seen continuous change. We just talked about that. The original city offices were on the northeast corner of the square. You see the top left picture there. Building is still standing. And it was recently just painted black and white, but the city offices sign is still there. So the entrance was on the square. We certainly want to be welcoming and inviting to all visitors, as many of you have just stressed. The main entrance historically was on the square. We have two entrances now, two primary public entrances on the square and Third Avenue in this building. We also have a back entrance on the alley side from the parking garage. From a security standpoint, we're going to want to think about not having too many entrances and controlling some of that from a safety standpoint. And how do we still make it very welcoming and not feel like a fortress, but protect the staff and leadership of the city over time. And then the corner here has always been anchored with pretty solid architecture, you could see from the Wagner and Crockett buildings. The 306 Public Square building that's in the northwest corner has one of those large arches, but it's been broken into an entry and a transom that recalls a little bit of that arch history, and you see it at Mellow Mushroom and down at Binks as well on Main Street, but those were not originally Stables buildings. So we're looking for some of that different context of what has happened in the past in downtown Franklin. On the next slide, if we talk about city operations, we want the building to be safe and secure. We want to promote occupant health for all the staff and visitors and well-being in the building. Obviously, this building doesn't have many windows and doesn't allow much daylight in it, so we certainly want to improve that. We want to address the service to the citizens with improved operational efficiencies and better citizen interaction, easy wayfinding, easy access to where they need to go. We want to incorporate flexibility in the future. That's going to be key for dealing with things like growth, like another pandemic type of situation, how the city's operations grow and potentially become more efficient, how city services are done by more or less people in 100 years, what that looks like. We want the building to allow for that flexibility as the city evolves and the city around it grows. And as Bev just said, we want a state-of-the-art facility that speaks to the level of care of Franklin. Franklin provides very high level of service to its citizens, and this building should reflect that as well. On the next page, as we talk about community amenities, we've touched on open outdoor spaces. Those can take on different forms. We've improved streetscape a lot. There are plazas, water features, potential gardens, different community spaces, and that could happen inside the building as well as outside of the building. And parking is going to be an issue, has already been brought up quite a bit. So we want safe parking for the city staff. We have the Second Avenue parking garage. As we build this building, looking at how we may provide additional parking above ground or below ground. We have a limited site that's anchored on 4 sides. Once we determine the programmatic square footage needed by each of the departments and for everybody to do their job successfully and allow for growth and any other functions that we need to provide in City Hall, then we're going to see what the parking demand of that is and how much space that requires and how to figure that into the master plan for this site. So with that, I'm going to stop and open up for additional comments and questions again.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
I think it's important to have a consideration for safety, but I've been in too many buildings where it was built as if safety were the single most important thing. And it is at first frustrating and then draining to be in a building like that. You can't, we're not housing prisoners here. You can't secure a building that has dozens or hundreds of employees in it from any and all calamities that might occur because some individual decides to make something bad happen. So while I agree that it's important to have safety as a consideration, it's not. It shouldn't even be in the top 5. This building needs to be one where, because when you organize a building around the concept of safety, you also organize the building around the concept of us and everyone out there. And that is not an acceptable way to contemplate or conceptualize a city hall. It's not a courthouse. I think safety is an issue to be considered. It's not the one that would drive the thing for me. For me, what would drive the thing would be what I consider to be the classic elements of public and common space, which would be, it tells you something about the place you are. And I don't mean with words. I mean with design, and it evokes a feeling in you. I'm not against or necessarily for art. I've said for 24 years that you don't want me picking art. I do think, however, that the space needs to be one that anyone who comes here, from either passing through as a tourist or comes here with the only thing that was ever important enough to bring them to City Hall in their life, as well as the people that are here every day, it should feel like a place that is welcoming to them. I do think it should be organized primarily around the actual daily use. It can't be something for everyone. Vice Mayor Berger talked about a meeting room for 500 people. I can't see that happening. That is beyond what I think this building even ought to try to be. You don't organize a building around the highest number of people that might ever arrive in it. If you did that, everything would be 10 times the size that it is. So we are I do think the mayor's comment is well placed. We are constrained with dimensions here. So I think we have to start with the idea that some number of actual human beings are going to have to work in this building to accomplish the point of having a city and thus a city hall. That's number one. After that, it should be functional and welcoming for people that might be expected to come here. And to the extent you can get that to be a statement about where we are and what we are here, then hats off to you. City Hall can't be a Swiss Army knife of buildings. It just can't. People should know what it is when they look at it. You can pick a post office from a mile away if you just know what Port Chattahoochee looks like. This may be the only time I ever comment on it. So I think it is important that we get it right. But at some point, we're just going to have to deal with the fact that this many square feet are needed for this many employees, and that starts to drive the outcomes.
Sure.
And if you can throw some gargoyles and uplighting, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's all great feedback, and we've had a lot of concern and discussion about Franklin's always been a welcoming, inclusive community, and not wanting to turn it into a fortress and not make it feel like you're going into a courthouse or a jail, and where that balance is and how to allow for flexibility that some of those provisions could be added in the future where we're a safe community now, and fortunately don't have a lot of threats that you hear in other parts of the country. So we don't want to over-design those kinds of elements. But we do want the feedback for what is appropriate for those that occupy the building and to make them feel safe at different levels. That's great feedback. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, you want to make another
Yeah,
comment?
I just want quickly, 2 points. I think I said earlier too, you can't be all things to all people.
Right.
And I just want to clarify, I was not talking about a meeting space for 500. That would be totally impractical. That's like, building your mall, building the parking for Christmas Day. But you could have a wall that opened up to facilitate, like Brandy was saying, maybe all the staff getting together at one time. That may happen once or twice a year, or may have one special event. But if you design it correctly, it can be multi-purpose and it flows. The other thing is, that's the comment I wrote down, Dana talked about, and I said, as far as safety, convenience and accessibility should not suffer for safety. And I'm totally with his comment on that, because I think we have to be very careful that
Sure.
we are accessible from most sides of this area.
Yeah,
Most sides
I
of the
think
building.
we have heard and know that that is certainly a high priority and part of the culture and character of the city of
You can
Franklin.
provide safety in many other ways, but it's not about us, it's about the people outside coming in here, and it is about us, but it is much greater than that. I think Dana articulated that pretty well as far as convenience and accessibility.
Alderman Barnhill.
Great.
Yeah, thanks. Matt.
I think what I think you have to do is you've got to design the city hall for the function that it should be. That's the employees that's here. I think you've got to provide ample parking spaces for them, and if it's parking spaces for the public. Once you do all of that, and you see what the footprint is, and then if you come back to something like this right here, I think I might be a little more receptive to it, but I'm not gonna build and have a Coke machine out there in the lobby if I don't have enough room for the city employee or somebody to function within that function. And that one lobby there, I guess it was in Austin, Texas. Texas, many things are bigger in Texas. So, and that would be the comment, but I would think that the starting point is when you bring us the information that you get from the employees and from the department heads to see what space they need and what we need to do to accommodate them. Then I think then you can go maybe have your public meetings and see what happens, because there's a lot of interested people who have a lot of interesting comments when they're basically thinking that it's somebody else's money paying for it. Okay?
Absolutely.
So
Right.
that being said, first things first, and then second things, and then the third, you
Well,
build on that.
and just to confirm that for you, that is our approach, that all of those staff interviews and all of the meetings we've been meeting weekly for almost a year, talking about all kinds of levels of detail about different aspects of that. What we don't want to do is say, let's only do that, and then we'll tell you what we might want to add later, because then we're starting over on the master plan, because we want to bring a master plan that we may say some of this didn't work as part of a master plan, it's not appropriate, there isn't room for it. But if it's something that we want to see that we think improves the operation and the efficiency and makes it more welcoming, we want to look at, we've looked at the frequency and size and time of day of meetings, so that we can say, well, maybe this space is multi-use and accommodates several meetings rather than a meeting room for each different function. And so that how can we be efficient with that as the space needs change, if meetings become more virtual and we need more places for staff? How is that space more easily converted and flexible to allow that to happen, so that we're not stuck with great big empty spaces that we don't know how to repurpose and are going to be very costly to renovate later? So-
We own the Marriott. Okay.
Mayor,
Who we got? I'm sorry, Alderman Peterson?
Just one specific thing that I want to say about, I noticed that this said sub-grade parking. I sent a very late email saying, have we had the geophysical, so what is it saying
Yeah.
about?
Matt, if you want to comment.
Yeah, because the water,
I
I've
didn't get
heard
a
the
chance
water
to
level
send you
is
that.
right
We have,
at the.
and we hit rock at about 22 feet below grade. So there's not level for it wouldn't be easy to accommodate a 5-level parking garage below grade. We could easily accommodate 1 or 2.
I'm talking about the water level.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean,
Right.
because
That
I
too.
have heard
Springs.
from some a scientific geologist, something like that,
Right.
saying that the water level around here, because we're so close to the river, is just almost at the surface. And so you don't need to have anything below if your water level is going to be right at the surface.
There is some water. There's not enough to preclude building a parking deck below grade. It's something that can be handled through design, like it was with Harpeth Square, which is right next to the river, when they went below grade there. We've been looking at that with the structural engineers and the civil engineers. I don't have a definitive, we are absolutely doing that or not doing that. We think it's an opportunity to keep open because we do have limited space.
They did a series of
look at.
borings all around the site that helped give a
Right.
sense of that, so it.
So we
There
have
is
that
the ability to go
documented.
down, as Matt said, somewhere around 20 feet seems,
But
Doable,
the water
possible.
level's not at 20 feet, though. I mean, you know.
well,
it's-
that's all factored in.
Okay, because I'd just like to see it, and just because it's close to the river doesn't necessarily mean.
No, it doesn't.
At all.
Right.
But
No,
as I say, I had just heard someone who many, many years ago looked at something that was going to be built around here.
I think we're straying
And-
a little too far for what information you need tonight.
Right.
Well, I know, but let me say to you, whenever they built the bank over next door, and you remember there, a lot of you may remember that there were some meeting rooms down on the bottom, but didn't they have to close them up because they had water problems? That might need to be looked at.
I think you're correct, Dan. They had some issues over at First Tennessee, what used to be First Tennessee.
That's
Bank.
right.
Right.
In the basement.
Yeah.
And
In the basement.
we have I have great confidence in the team you've put together that we're not going to have meeting rooms and water. So I'd really like for us to stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish
sir.
tonight with us and not get into all this underground
say,
garage and
we-
things like that, if you don't mind. And I've got Alderman
Right.
Blanton, but I know you've got, we have limited time, so.
Right. Thank
No,
you.
And I'll be really quick too. My thing is, we keep now we've talked about going below. We've always thought about this would be a multi-level endeavor
Yeah.
that would be mixed use. And I'm not saying you haven't brought that into the conversation yet, but I think that's gonna make a huge difference as to what needs, prime location on the base floor, what departments jive together to be positioned other
Absolutely.
places.
Good
Right.
point.
So I'm interested in that too.
Yep, that's all forthcoming.
Done.
So, well, let's go ahead to the next slide, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So as we talk about functionality, we want to be very conscientious about the design and build purposeful settings, emphasize community and culture. This is Franklin City Hall, not a generic city hall to be built anywhere, and it's not a generic office building. City functions do operate differently and have a different kind of interaction with their customers as the citizens and visitors come to visit. We want to encourage circulation and connection among the staff and with the public. We want to break down barriers between departments so that they're not isolated in silos and can collaborate together and help each other in their different disciplines and plan for growth. And then if we go to the next slide with customer interface, we want to provide certainly an inviting, I'm going to emphasize the inviting aspect of that in our conversation lobby. Again, these are things that have been suggested and brought up, but are fair game to shoot down, whether or not we provide a coffee shop in the lobby for while people are waiting for meetings or waiting for their item to come up in a board meeting. Lobby connection to all of the public interfacing services, whether it's paying bills, getting permits, knowing where you're going, having easy access to that.
Is there any reason you can't have like 2 people doing all of the interface?
2 might be pushing it, but I think
Well, I
there,
mean, it's intake and receipts. And I don't mean to minimize what staff does in interface, but right now, you have to go to the department, whichever one it is.
right.
I'm just organizationally, is it possible that you could have intake people who are cross-trained on getting it to the, I mean, I assume that the person at the desk, if you bring in plans, is not necessarily the person who ultimately receives the plans and acts on the plans on behalf of the city. So to the extent it's an administrative matter, I don't know that, I mean, it just seems to me like maybe we don't need as many points of interface in a new building as we
Sure.
have in the present building.
And we're talking about those levels of operation with each of the departments as well as overall leadership.
Well, I can
to
tell you what
say
every department head's gonna say.
Well,
They're gonna want their own desk with 4 people at it.
Well,
Right.
not necessarily. We've done things with the one stop down the hall that brings
Okay,
different
yeah, well,
aspects
like-
together. so-
Like one stop,
Yeah.
one, not one down the hall, one.
Well, that's what it does.
Yeah,
I'm telling
it-
you, we do some of that now.
Okay, great,
So that
good.
there are
I don't come
lessons
here and pay
learned from
bills.
some of that already, and we can continue to build.
Yeah,
on
I mean,
And starting with a clean slate, we're looking for ways to improve that efficiency and not send people off in too many different directions where they don't know where to go.
yeah, anyone that walks in
So-
this building shouldn't have to go to 2 different counters to do everything they want to do.
We've talked about informal gathering and waiting areas, efficient transactions, which speaks exactly to what Alderman McClendon's talking about, and ease of accessibility and wayfinding, not sending people into a maze and that sort of thing.
That
So
also enhances your opportunity to make security.
It does, absolutely.
Change your pictures. I mean, we're not gonna look like Boston City Hall or Canada.
No,
I think those, I'm concerned that those pictures, people are gonna see those pictures, and that's what they're gonna expect, is that our city hall is gonna look like that.
I understand.
So-
It's a bit of a challenge as we look for city hall-specific pictures, that people aren't building new city halls every day. They build them and live in them for a long time, and so as we're looking for what's being done, sometimes the character isn't right or the scale is different, but we're looking for concepts, again, not necessarily that style. But your point is absolutely well taken, and we'll really try and customize that as we're going forward even better. Do we have any other comments on these 2 slides? Want to keep going? Okay. Okay. As we talk, what types of supporting uses may or may not be incorporated into a city hall? We have gatherings and events and festivals downtown. The area on the square gets used as a stage on occasion for performances. We've seen historic parks and gardens and plazas. We've talked about some of that as open space tonight. Visitor information, historic displays, potential for incubator space, could be meeting space for the community. It could be places for small startups that the city has a partnership with to help them get on their feet. Community meeting space, much like the police headquarters has a community meeting room, and commercial uses, which, again, may or may not be appropriate for City Hall. If we go to the next slide.
Real quickly, may I ask, something brought to mind with this bottom picture. Bev talked about being able to use the rooftop, which I think is great.
Absolutely.
But I look at this bottom picture, and it's inviting and it's wonderful, but I think about the staff who would work here, being able to go outside in a private area while they're working. How do you keep that from them not being able to have that space as a, what's the word, just a respite, but then having to compete with the citizens? So how do we balance the staff perks of being here and enjoying their workspace without having to vie for it with general access? So maybe there's some spaces that are just
I think we
for
can limit
staff.
access, and we can designate zones that may be open to the public or open only by invitation or event. And I did, thank you, I kind of glossed over the pictures there, but the idea of what meeting space and streetscape activity might look like, public art in the form of statues, how we look at those pedestrian spaces. For example, the idea, between City Hall and 231 could be much more user-friendly and much more accessible space, and then some of those rooftops.
Matt, you might want to, if you take a look at that bottom right, Brandy's comment, I think that's really a valid comment, but I
Right.
think you could take something like that and do it on floor 2.
That's right.
And outside people's offices.
Yep.
Where you have meeting space outside.
Right.
Or a place to go and eat lunch outside, or to get away and work outside when the weather's nice. So you could do that where the public is not accessible to it. It's actually accessible to.
Right, we can use the vertical aspect of the
employees.
building and how we adjust the
You
massing
could
to
take-
create those spaces that are
You
special.
you look at buildings now, and people have their own decks and patios out front.
Mhm.
You can jet that out and do that.
Yep, absolutely. Let me just touch on the next slide, and then we
I
can
just
talk
wanna
about both
know-
of them
I just
together.
want to know one more thing. Is that Benjamin Franklin in the bottom?
That's not Benjamin Franklin, but it could be. So, and then, these are some additional images of different types of spaces where the activated alley could be an example of what we do between City Hall and the Second Avenue parking garage to dress that space up where as pedestrians want to walk through, but we still need to bring vehicular circulation through, it can be a much more pleasant space. Here's other examples of rooftops and outdoor courtyards, plazas, and things that where greenery can be brought in to soften that, make it more welcoming, provide some shade, allow for meeting spaces or a place to take a break or eat lunch, or if you're coming to a meeting and showing up early and don't want to wait inside, we'd provide a place for somebody to do that outside. So with that, I'll just pause again real quick in case we want to talk about any of these any further. And if not, I'll keep going. And good?
Keep rolling.
Okay. So if we go to the next slide and we talk a little bit about architectural style. Again, historic downtown Franklin, we have a lot of history in our architecture. We do have a new building that we're building that's not going to be automatically historic, but that doesn't mean it can't draw upon some of the influences of what we see in Main Street and on the square. We talked about the arches of the livery stables and even the arch in the old original city offices where the fire truck used to park in the building, and the one you see across the square. Even some of the upper windows are punched window openings as opposed to big extensive glass. So that's more in keeping with the scale and character of downtown Franklin, and some of those arch details have shown up there. If we can go to the next slide. Talking about materials and detailing, you see obviously a lot of brick. The brick is handled in a lot of different ways, from the flat parapet roofs at the Fifth Third Bank to varying parapets and stone copings. We've got brackets. In most of these cases, though, you see some depth in the facade. You don't see flat walls. You see brick used in ornamental fashion to create different frames around the windows. You see stone introduced at the copings at the roof or around the windows and the sills and at the heads. Canopies help lower the scale of some of the taller buildings to provide shelter at the entrances and call attention to where the entrances are. And then, again, you've got another example of some of the wood storefronts that you see along Main Street within the brick facades as a change of materials there. And then the next slide. These are some examples of Alexandria, Virginia City Hall has a large plaza with a fountain in the front. This is a very grand, formal kind of space. It's obviously a different proportion than what we have available to us on the square, but it's one way of addressing the front of the building. Mount Pleasant, South Carolina built a new city hall just a few years ago. It is a more suburban approach where it has surface parking around it, and it's a little more contemporary than what you would expect to see here. But it does draw on the brick and the stone and materials, the vertical rhythms, and then a porch at the end to provide shade and an outdoor gathering space. We've talked about this being a civic building. The courthouse is a grand civic building, and Alderman McClendon talked about the presence of the building, and you should know it's a city hall. So while most of the character of downtown is storefronts and Main Street architecture, we are not necessarily building storefronts in a new city hall. So we want to talk about what that presence should be and what it means so that we don't compete with the courthouse or detract from it, but we still establish the presence of a civic municipal building here on the square. The two buildings at the bottom are examples of new buildings built in historic town contexts. The bottom is a hotel built in Birmingham, Michigan, and one of the details we saw in this was how it activated the street edge and really provided a strong street presence, which you could imagine potentially along Third Avenue. But then as the building stepped up above that base, the massing breaks and it creates a rooftop courtyard at that second floor. Then it steps again at the top to provide additional rooftop space. This is a little taller than what I would expect in Franklin, but it provides some of the ways of organizing the building with the base, middle, top that we have in our design guidelines, some traditional elements while still being a new building, and how it addresses the street and massing. In a different manner, the Montclair, New Jersey building on the bottom right also introduces brick and stone, creates a very strong base and a streetscape along the bottom right side of the building. They anchored the corner of their building by creating a reveal either side of that corner piece where it's still one building, but it breaks the massing up by introducing that reveal, and then they step the roof back again. So these are different ways of breaking up massing so that we don't create a big block that overpowers the square or the streetscape. And then we can step the building down, similar to the way that Courtyard does in the Birmingham project, to address as we move from the square back towards the residential neighborhood and the lower scale buildings to the south. So let me stop there and ask for any feedback.
Alderman Blanton.
This will be my last comment, and we talked about this in Public Arts Commission. I think it might, and it's just my opinion, so, I mean, whatever, but you probably already heard this. Instead of accessing the front of the building, like, on the square, where we're positioned between Third and the square, what could set it apart and make it stand out more like a beacon is to have that access be on the diagonal, so that you've got your entry point hugs both of Third and the square. So you're walking up and it's sitting in front of you instead of entering on Third or entering on the square.
Sure. That entry point's a big topic of discussion that we really want everyone's
What would
feedback
be
on
the
as
only
much as
place on
possible.
the square that has that?
Well, actually,
type
the
of
building
entrance?
diagonally, the bank building on the corner, it has its entry on the corner and Starbucks has the same chamfered corner entry.
I mean, on the
So
square, though.
there is a little bit of that. You're right, on the square, that's correct.
Anybody else? Has that been helpful, Matt?
Absolutely. The more feedback, the better. As I said, you're not going to hurt our feelings. We want to hear what you don't like as much as what you do, so that every step of the way we are moving forward in a positive manner and we don't have U-turns and major revisions, and we want everybody to be excited. And we're going to continue to change this as we go. We're going to get feedback on the next stage, and I know, as we said, we can't be everything to everyone. We won't make everybody happy, but we're going to try to make as many people happy as we can. And we want that feedback so that we can continue to develop and the design can evolve to make it the best it can be. We don't expect to come to you with the very first thing and it be the home run that we proceed with. It's going to be the next stage based on what you've told us tonight in this public engagement process that we can incorporate into the design to get it closer. And that's going to be a continuing process and conversation that we have with you all and with the public over the next 6 years. So thank you all very much.
Thanks,
And if
Matt.
you have additional comments, please let us know, or let Eric and Vernon and Kelly know, because we'll be seeing them on a regular basis.
Okay. Water Management Department Capital Investment Projects.
Hi there.
So I'll just comment real quick as Michelle starts. We've been taking you through the last several months, just an update on approved capital projects, where we are. And this is I think that's our last installment. We've done transportation and parks and facilities. And so Michelle's going to walk you through sort of a status update and other information related to capital projects. And the good news is this counts towards some of your board training credit as a utility board. So that's a plus too.
Yay.
So be sure to listen.
There may or may not be a test at the end. We'll see.
So as Eric said, good evening. I'm just going to kind of run through some of the projects that we've done this past year. Some is with all of our staff that's kind of been in and out to kind of limit exposures. We've really been working hard to kind of continue the level of service that we provide. And so I wanted to give you an update on some of the larger things, initiatives that we've taken. So we'll go to the next slide. So one of the larger projects that we've done that's actually reached substantial completion is a replacement of the sewer at Spencer Creek at Franklin Road. So this is kind of going out of all the construction on Franklin Road north toward Mac Hatcher. The sewer from the east side of Franklin Road all the way underneath the railroad, all the way underneath Franklin Road, underneath Spencer Creek, and connecting into the end of the First United Methodist Church property closer to the wastewater plant. So there was some hydraulic constraints in the sewer that we removed, so we've actually restored the original capacity in this line. In addition to kind of making some modifications to allow us to potentially upgrade, to add an additional line for increased flows from Cool Springs. Okay. That's, okay. So I kind of just have some project statistics on here. So the bid amount was $2.9 million. We started construction last year. Garney Constructors did fairly well on this, completed it ahead of schedule for below the contracted amount at $2.58 million. So we pretty proud of this. It's replaced with ductile iron sewer, so it's gonna be there for a while. We bored underneath Franklin Road and underneath the railroad. We had inspection there. The railroad was a big constraint, but we managed to appease everyone, so we're happy for that one. That's confusing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is another one I kind of wanted to mention. So CIPP, cured in place pipe. So we do this we have a contract with, an on-call contract for our sewer mains in addition to sewer laterals that we have. So those are the lines that go from the mains to a house. Typically to the clean out at the house. And so what they do is they kind of take this, you can kind of see a liner right there. It's kind of this plastic piece of flexible pipe that they invert in, and then they cure it by steam. And so it hardens and kind of increases, it's kind of a new pipe within the pipe. And it doesn't really reduce any of the capacity of the pipe. We like to do this because it increases, we have a lot of clay pipe still in the system. We have a lot of older infrastructure. This allows us to be less invasive by replacing the pipe with just a minimal kind of disruption at the manhole. So we're getting into the habit of using this in more and more areas, like closer to downtown, where it's harder to kind of open cut excavation. So it's working well for us. I kind of just have some statistics up here. So we have this as an annual contract. So we did this in fiscal year 21, and we have more monies allotted to do this in fiscal year 22. We'll go to the next slide. So this one's Holiday Court Pump Station. So in fiscal year 20, we had the design of this by one of our consultants, and then fiscal year 21, we actually did the construction of this. So this is off of Royal Oaks, kind of on the northeast side of the Royal Oaks 96 intersection right there, back behind those office buildings. It's hard to see, you wouldn't know it's a pump station unless you knew it was there. It used to be a can station, which was literally a can that operators had to crawl down into to maintain pumps. Not quite the safest, so we replaced that with a standard submersible station, which is just a wet well that gets submerged with wastewater and pumps it out. So it's easier for us to maintain. It's what we're trying to standardize around the department. So we had a bid award of $555,000 roughly. The final project cost was $538,000. We did end up charging some liquidated damages because there were some overages by the contractor. Some of the other cool things that we've done is we've allowed kind of some connections for bypass pumping in case we ever get to like a situation where the pumps need, we have a power outage. We need to, bypass pump around the station. We also have some CamFit fittings or CamLock fittings where we can have some generator hookups. So the water department has a portable generator that we can bring by truck. So it's pretty exciting. We're kind of using this design. We're actually have a couple more stations designed in the budget for this year. So using this is a good example for those. So to the next slide. So this is a really big one in our department, advanced metering infrastructure. And it doesn't sound like it's fun, but we're actually, so this project is actually touching every water meter in the city of Franklin, and it's replacing it So we can automatically read it by the touch of a button from, either utility billing or revenue management or from the water department. So we're kind of doing this in conjunction with both with a consultant who's kind of doing a contractor who's kind of doing some more of the towers and the radio reads, in addition to the water department, our employees actually installing all of the meters. So this will help provide us more accurate water and sewer billing because we bill sewer off of water consumption. So we're looking forward to that. I have some pictures. We've taken the existing tanks that we've had and we've installed a tower on top of them. You probably wouldn't see it if you were driving by. So it's pretty minimally invasive, but is going to provide us a lot of benefit. The customers a lot of benefit too. It's going to allow real-time monitoring of water usage so we can see leaks that happen in faster time rather than it being on your monthly bill that you see. So we've installed and tested 4 base stations at tanks, and then we've installed a regional network interface that's going to allow us to pull all of that data together. So this is kind of a cool project because we have staff from IT and from the water department and revenue management all working together to make this happen. So it's an exciting one. It's a multi-year project. This one has probably been impacted the most by this past year, just because the water department's doing most of the work and we haven't had staff here to kind of, to continue on. So it's progressing a little bit slower, but it's getting there. So the next one. So the next one is Gish Street. And so I just kind of pulled some pictures from our GIS here. It's not too exciting. We just replaced the sewer and water main along the street, but it was old, aging infrastructure. So we did the design with one of our on-call consultants this past year, and then this year, the water department will be doing the actual construction. So we'll be saving some money with just material cost. So it's about 750 feet of 6-inch clay sewer that is replaced with PVC, 900 feet of cast-in-place water line that's reaching the end of its life. So we've had a lot of breaks, so we're replacing it with 6-inch ductile iron. So the design cost was about what we had budgeted, about $40,000, and so we have $160,000 budgeted for construction. We obviously don't, with it being in-house, don't anticipate it being that much. Go to the next slide. So this is one you've been hearing about for quite a while. So this is the Reclaim Booster Pump Station at Red Wing Farms. So this is on the site of our existing sewer pump station, and this will take the reclaimed water that's going to the southeast part of town and boost the pressure for some of those customers where we've, heard that we've kind of had pressure that's been lacking. So we finally, this has taken a little bit longer to actually get into construction, but we're finally actually bid this. You just approved the bid award. Actually, it'll be on next work session. The bid award for this and then the pilot plan to be constructed starting July 1st will be a notice to proceed. So we have 4 pumps. So this will take the improvements that are at the wastewater plant at that facility, and then it'll kind of build upon that. So when we a couple years ago did the Reclaim Water Master Plan, there was a series of improvements that were identified to boost the reclaim pressure down to the southeast part of town, and this is one of those. So this will help us to kind of provide that reclaim pressures that Berry Farm needs, and help us get in that until we can potentially see other customers come online. Let's see. So it's going to be a masonry brick building. Kind of just wanted to point that out. So a permanent building. We'll be expanding the fence line from the existing pump station to include this area, but it'll still be all within our property. So next slide. Okay, so this is, so we have, the departments, we're kind of moving. So CMOM, I have that down there, is Capacity Management, Operations, and Maintenance. So this is kind of an EPA recommended program. So as part of that, keeping in line with that, we're evaluating pump stations to kind of see if they're operating correctly, if they're starting and stopping too much, if they're, the building's about to fall down or anything, just to make sure that we can keep up with those. So we have annual monies in our budget to evaluate these, and so we're continuing on that this next year. We did 2 this past year. So we have $50,000. We did Meadows and the Goose Creek pump stations. We have the reports you can see from those, and they've kind of provided some recommendations that are good. So we're going to work, in the next coming years to implement those, and then it'll be this continuous cycle of evaluating all of our pump stations. So we do an overall condition assessment. of the building, of the roof, of the pumps, of the electrical, HVAC, all of those things. I think that's about all for this one. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, this is one I wanted to kind of highlight, and it's not really a capital project, but it really helps us with capital projects. So we have we have 27 permanent flow monitors within the system, and so these are actual devices inside manholes that monitor the flow, so the everyday flow from the sewer system. And this helps us. We have a model that we developed a handful of years ago that evaluates the capacity. So we take the data from these monitors and calibrate that model to make sure that we can accurately see what's happening in the system. So we have 27 permanent flow monitors. Every couple years we do wet weather monitoring. And what that does is with all of the potential rainfall and infiltration that gets into pipes, it allows us to see that difference of flow. And so where we need to focus our rehabilitation efforts in the system. So we have one of our internal engineers that does the monitoring of the system, and then that runs the model to be able to look at, when we approve availability requests for large developments, where we need to do, infrastructure upgrades, those types of things. Next slide. So this is the water model. And so we really kind of hit this hard this past year. And this is to kind of model the distribution system. So with the feeds that we have from Harpeth Valley, the 2 vaults that we have in addition to the water that's produced by our water plant, to kind of see where we've got potential deficiencies within the systems. We look at water age. So how old is your water is something that doesn't seem like it's an important thing, but it's a pretty good water quality aspect for us. So every pipe, every valve, every hydrant, every storage tank, and every pump station is in this water model. So we calibrate it all, we look at it. We evaluate the capacity, the demand, the disinfection byproducts that are formed. It helps us to make better decisions regarding the capital improvements that we make to the system. Next slide. So I wanted to point this one out too. So in addition to the water model, we also were doing some analysis on the raw water reservoir plant, the lake that we have, just put it that way. During summer you see in any standing source of water body, the potential for algae blooms and those types of things. So because we have this brand new plant, the water that we have is still suffering the same sort of water quality characteristics because it's raw water, it's pulled from the river. So how do we better manage that? And actually from this study that we've done, that we have a consultant helping us with, we've actually reduced our chemical usage by 30% this past year. And then this year, so that's from 20 to 21, and then this year we're on track to reduce it by about 10 to 20% more. So we're getting a little bit smarter about the chemicals that we dose and then how that affects the downstream membranes and the GACs and the processes that we have. So next slide. So this one's not very exciting. I don't have any pretty pictures for this one, but we also are doing some asset management. So on all of our horizontal assets, so all of the pipes and the manholes that we have in the system need to be replaced every now and then. And so we have a consultant helping us with kind of prioritizing how we use rehabilitation monies by scoring those pipes with a numerical score, and then putting that into a database and kind of creating some logic to help us better use those monies. So it doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it'll help us with all of that CIPP lining and with all of the operations that we have. It'll help us better focus those into more concerted efforts. So go next slide. So I saved the best for last. So this is the plant. So this is the project we've been working on for a while now. I have a recent aerial view of it under construction. It's a lot of brown, but it's starting to grow green. We're starting to grow grass. So the initial contract amount was a little over 132 million. We're about 30 months into the project. We've spent a good portion of that. We're still within our SRF monies, so we're still within that amount. And final completion, so substantial is February of next year, and final completion is scheduled for May of next year. Then I've got some really cool pictures. Next slide. So since we haven't been able to do an in-person tour, I wanted to kind of show you some of the cool things that have happened out there since the last time you were there. So this is the Headworks facility. So this is the beginning of the plant. So after it gets pumped, after it comes into the station, it gets pumped to this area. This is a new structure. The top left photo is the new Headworks, so it's the new fine screens. So this is like a comb that gets out all of the really small material. And it is super efficient. It has got these like traveling rakes that continuously clean them. The bottom picture is our Vortex, the bottom left picture is Vortex Grit, which is kind of just a swirling action which removes all of the inorganics. So once again, more efficient than the old facility. One of the important things is that, so this new Headworks is rated at 52 million gallons. So our old Headworks was rated at 32. That was as most we could put through the plant. So this was our old Headworks was the bottleneck. That's why we, had potential overflows in other places. This is going to allow us to push more through. We have, you can see that in the top right picture, we have a bypass channel. So in case we get like a 2010 event again, we can, just push flow without having to actually screen it just to get it through. So go to the next picture. So this is the biological nutrient removal. This is really the heart of our nutrient removal. So the middle picture is BNR Basin 2, and that's the one we've actually since put that basin online. So it's a pretty big milestone for us. So that bottom area where you can see the new concrete is the fermentation zone, and that will allow us, it's kind of a dedicated phosphorus removal zone. We'll be growing some different organisms in there, putting some nice fatty acids in there. We've got new mixers with better oxygen transfer efficiency, so we'll be able to increase our phosphorus removal, which is going to be important for future permanent renewals. So right now, we basin number 2 is online, and we're actually into basin 1, which is the top basin. So that's drained, and we're working on the same improvements. So which may not seem important, but the electrical distribution center. So this is really, and I think we've probably talked about this before, but we've got all the power coming into this building. So this was a pretty important building. This is one of the first buildings that was constructed at this site. There's millions of miles of conduit underneath this floor that you can't see. But all of the power comes into this building. Another important thing is that it's dual feed, which means that it's coming from 2 different Middle Tennessee substations. So if one of them were to go out from whatever sorts of reason, we can switch, and we can automatically switch to the other substation and still continue to run the plant. So this is the solids building. So if you drive out to the plant, you will see 2 new massive buildings. And so this is one of them. They're nice brick facade. They're beautiful, but they're big. And so these are the sludge screens. So when solids come in, they're going to go through this screen to get cleaned out of anything that might be remaining in them. The picture on the right is the cake bin, which is a huge structure, a metal structure. So all the sludge cake will drop into there, and then it'll be fed into the other processes. So they're still working on this building. I don't have a lot of fun equipment, but we can go to the next one. So these are the heat exchangers that are installed. So these will take those that liquid, the kind of after the THP, the thermal hydrolysis process. It'll take that liquid sludge, essentially as it's really hot, and it'll pull the heat from that, and we'll help heat the digesters, which is the big tank. So pretty exciting process that we have. Next slide. So then just to kind of sum it up, so these are the projects that we have slated on the budget for next year. So if you didn't read the huge budget manual, just wanted to kind of summarize some of those. So we're obviously continuing the sewer lateral main line, and then also adding in manhole lining as well. So we have a lot of manholes that corrode due to hydrogen sulfide and kind of some turbulent conditions. So we have monies allotted for those. We'll do the Adams Street infrastructure construction. I'm sorry, that's design. We'll do in-house. We're gonna replace the sewer line at New Hope Academy. We're gonna continue on with AMI. It's a big deal. We're gonna do the design for Battle Avenue, replacing both the water and sewer. We're gonna replace or do a design for the for both the water and sewer on Buckworth Lane. And then these are the two pump stations that I talked about, Riverview Forest Crossing 1 and 2, that we're gonna look at replacing. So those are can stations, not safe for operators to enter into. So we're gonna look at replacing those as well. We have a water line on Old Carter's Creek Pike that we're gonna replace. It's a line that goes down Old Carter's Creek to the end of our service area. And then we're gonna replace the Bonsall Way line, and that's gonna be work that's gonna be done in-house. So with that, is there any questions?
Good job.
So we'll do the
Impressive-
quiz next.
Impressive amount of work.
Yeah. I do have one specific, Adams Street infrastructure. When do you expect to start that? And the reason that I say that is because it's probably the roughest street in Franklin for one block that needs to be repaved, where they build all those new houses and they run the thing out and they dig the road up and they don't halfway repave it.
Yeah.
So when will that be, I'm sure we're not gonna pave that until the Adams Street infrastructure construction is completed.
So the design is, the survey has happened, and so the design is progressing. We're hoping to finish it up by the end of the fiscal year, by June 30th, and then we have it slated for the construction of next year. So as soon as we can finish up the design, we're ready to go ahead and get it constructed.
So we're looking at next year before there's any smoothing of that road out?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it'll take a while for, we'll have to get it through the bid award process and,
Okay.
uh-oh.
Okay, ready to move on to the next one?
Yes, sir.
We'll go to discussion regarding noise in town. Alderman Martin?
Mayor, if you had rather I hold off till next time, it's 5 minutes after 7, and I'm not gonna rush through this, because we got a lot of, we might have a lot of conversation about.
Okay, we'll stop right here and we'll start.
But I would like for it to be number 1 on the next agenda.
I would too. Can we add Liberty Pike?
We
to
hear
that?
the noise you're making.
Number one.
I'm gonna add Liberty Pike to that. Thank you very much.
What time, Ken?
Oh, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. That gives you enough time.